The album, considered a legacy-defining work that bridged the gap between pub rock, soul, and the emerging punk rock scene. It's the story behind the 1976 album by Graham Parker, Howlin Wind. We've got Graham Parker himself and author Jay Nachman coming up next on Booked on Rock.
We're totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roller!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to Booked on Rock. This is the podcast for those about to read and rock. I'm Eric Senich, very excited to talk to this episode's guests. We have legendary musician Graham Parker and the author of the brand new book titled Graham Parker's Howlin Wind, Jay Nachman. Guys, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us, Eric.
My pleasure.
Jay, you've been a Graham Parker fan for many years, so no need to ask you how thrilling it was to spend time with him to get his story put into the book. I'm just curious, how did the two of you connect for this project?
Yeah, so I had a now mostly defunct blog. And so I had done a couple stories with Graham. He might not have remembered me, but I was able to send them to him and say, hey, we've had these things. Would you be interested in a book? And we also had some mutual associations. I'd gotten to know Brinsley Schwartz, the guitar player, and his former manager, Dave Robinson. So I was sort of a little bit in his orbit. He knew I could write a little bit, and he readily agreed to do it.
To understand Graham the artist, it's to know his origins. Jay, you write, quote, Parker did what all great singers and songwriters do. While he was writing and singing about his life, he was singing about mine. Now, this is something that an artist can't fake. There's the story in the book, Graham, when you played a gig in Surrey, England with Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton, and Joan Armatrading. Phonogram Records could have helicoptered you in, but you said, no, I'm good. My parents live 10 miles away, and you stayed with them and you did the show. Talk about your early days, your childhood, your teen years, and how they formed you as a person and as an artist.
The same thing as everybody else who was 12 years old. The Beatles and the Stones came along and everybody else came along and we had our own music. It wasn't Elvis Presley from my cousin's, slightly older cousin's generation or anything else. But I was exposed to all forms of music that were available in the 50s, I suppose, when my parents had the big wooden transistor radio that had the drinks cabinet underneath it. And we would listen to a mixture of, there was English novelty songs, but a lot of American stuff, from Doris Day to Duke Ellington, quite a bit of jazz influence there, which crept into my work from the first album. On the song Lady Doctor is a prime example of having that kind of understanding of the swing of jazz, and then of course R&B and rock and roll, which if it doesn't swing, it's just rock. And that's every musician age 12, I knew, every kid picked up an instrument and decided we want to be like the Beatles or whatever it was. And that's what I did. I put a bunch of kids together and we dressed like the Beatles. We had the haircuts, managed to get Cuban heeled shoes somewhere. And I was living in the suburbs, really suburb country in Surrey, the county of Surrey, only 35 miles south of London, where I was born and lived for 4 years. And I was one of those kids who couldn't, by the age of 17, I was getting claustrophobic in the suburbs of Britain. I needed more, so I left home, went to the island of Guernsey and met a whole different crowd of people, more international, even though the island is only just between southern England and France, and much more French, really, the names of the people there, very French origin. But people came from all around Ireland, America, and worked there. You could easily get a job, and I got a job picking tomatoes and then in a bakery and a few other bits and pieces, and it was quite idyllic, really. And I was there when the psychedelic thing was going on, which I'd missed in Britain, being slightly too young, I suppose. But it was all going on in Guernsey, which is a weird thing, really. And a small place, you're going to be exposed to things like that if you're young. And the next crowd I was hanging out with were long-haired psychedelic freaks, and that was me. So it was that from the Beatles, wherever the Beatles and the Stones got their music from, we soon realized when I was a little kid, was the blues, and it was black music in America. That's where it came from, and they were doing their own way of doing it. So that upbringing was very strong in me. Soul music and ska, in when I was in my 15-year-old stage, was really popular in a sort of underground way, and I'd go out dancing to that kind of music. It was sort of moddy boy music. We had the short hair and sort of clothes that went with it. I mean, in most fashions we were exposed to, and that brought music with it.
There's one story that I thought I had there are a few things Graham would tell me, then I would do my research, and I would say, oh, he did this in an interview in 1981, or he said this in an interview in 1976. But one thing I did find surprising, and is that he said that on his parents' record cabinet, which he spoke about, he would hear Danny Kaye's Inchworm and Bing Crosby, and he said something like, I beg your pardon, I can't remember the exact quote, but those burrow into you in some way. And I thought that was surprising that that was an element of his musical background. One quick note, Graham, I never said this to you, but as I was also doing research, I read an interview with Nick Lowe, and he also mentioned Danny Kaye's Inchworm.
Yeah,
So
right.
it was out there in the atmosphere. So that was interesting and surprising. But, it was interesting following Graham's evolution from those early soul music records he would get, then, the Beatles and the Stones. And then, as he said, ska. Later on, it was psychedelic music and then singer-songwriters, but also wedged in there, he became a white blues fanatic for a bit. So he was picking up all these influences along the way, and they were absorbed and turned to his own thing when he's ready to make his record.
Bruce Springsteen talked about Graham's music and voice in a documentary. This quote is in the book. He said, quote, Graham's music was always aggressive sounding because of his voice. He always had that caustic attitude, which he balanced with tremendous soul and warmth. So it was a beautiful combination of things. Your vocal style, Otis Redding's influence on you as a vocalist is clear. What was it about him in particular that connected with you?
Well, it was, I'd heard him, I'm sure, on the radio, but very infrequently. And when I couldn't have been more than 14 when a cousin of mine was leaving. And in those days, they couldn't cram everything into the tiny little cars that they had when he was leaving the area with his parents. So he gave me a record or two. One of them was the Four Tops record, which had Baby, I Need Your Lovin' in. If you listen to that, I think it was their first album, it might have been. It's all very it's very lush string instruments, it was stunning in that way. But Otis Redding was stunning in another way. This guy was kind of bleeding, when he sang. It was incredibly powerful. So I would sit in the front room and listen to these two records, and Otis, well, both of them, Otis particularly, would almost bring me to tears with the immense emotion that he could pack into a song, as well as having the chops to do it, the vocal chops. Pretty incredible. So, and I think years later, after when I was starting to find what became my actual style, that got me my first record deal with Howlin Wind, that kind of came back in a way. The Levi Stubbs and Otis Redding way of projecting a song, and doing it like your life depends on it, with great intensity. I mean, of course, I couldn't sing like those guys. Who can? But so they were inspiring back when I was a kid, and it was inspiring just as my career was beginning. Those kind of influences can come back at you when you least expect it, really. And it was also a way to start listening to those early soul records again, and anything on that order, R&B and many other things. I was still listening to modern stuff as well, but that crept back into me and started to form quite an influence on what I was about to write, which was the songs that made Howlin' Wind and even Heat Treatment. And from then on, as I always point out, when my first album came out in 1976, punk was a word in the back pages of the news of the music press. It was not really a thing. And everybody says, oh, it was all punk rock. No, it wasn't. Not when Howlin Wind came out, not even when Heat Treatment came out, my second album, which was the same year. It was buzzing around. It was buzzing. It was probably going to become a force, but nobody knew. And my attitude to my singing was accidentally a bit like a preemptive strike on what was about to come without me knowing it. I just wanted to destroy prog rock and all the things I'd liked 2 years ago. And the music I'd lay around listening and watching the ceiling change shape and affecting my life quite deeply. I wanted to destroy it now. And I think if you don't have that, it's a good drive to have. It was a drive. It was like, yes, these, in the suburbs there, when I went back after my traveling to Guernsey and Morocco, it was just like Robot City, in the suburbs of Britain there, only 35 miles south of London. A good day for people was to go out, the husband and the wife, and wash their cars. That was quality time they spent together with sudsy water. It was, and there was a soap opera I remember very well called The Crossroads Motel. That came along. Before that, of course, there was the Great Coronation Street, which was a very gritty thing at the time, but I was very young then and everyone liked it. This Crossroads Motel was a sort of morality tale of how you should be in the suburbs. And so it was interesting to have all these experiences for me in these different countries, and working in Gibraltar, getting a job there and traveling and living in France for a while, until I made my way to Morocco, which I was about 20 about then, 21. And it was interesting to go back and live with my parents and get factory jobs, because I had nothing else. So, I wasn't going to be a musician, or was I? I didn't know. I just kept writing and writing with every influence in me and throwing them away. And I'd watched this Crossroads Motel, even as my career had started, because it was tremendously inspiring. It made me particularly angry at the mentality of much of, sort of suburban, provincial Great Britain. And out there in the suburbs in 1975 and 76, people were just still discovering progressive rock. They were discovering Genesis because they were all straights and went to work and stuff, and so they grew their hair long. I mean, it was also already a very terrible sign when you see your uncle you haven't seen for years and he's got long hair, or and flared pants. It's like, no, this has to end. And I think that drove me very heavily. This must end. Okay, straight trousers, short hair, angry. Look like you want to kill somebody on stage instead of, oh, peace and love, man, twiddling around. Because the audiences we had, me and the Rumour in 76, even into 77, would sit down on the floor cross-legged. That was the exact thing I wanted to destroy, which I'd done myself, a year or two earlier, watching what were called Tyrannosaurus Rex before they renamed themselves T-Rex and started having pop singles that were much better than what they've been doing before. So it was that kind of attitude, and I don't think I was alone in that. When we saw what happened with punk rock, I think a lot of those kids who were mostly younger than me were seeing the same thing and saying, we've got to destroy this. I think Johnny Rotten wore a T-shirt on stage saying, I hate Pink Floyd. And people hated him for that, hated him. And then they loved him a week later because he'd reinvented the whole thing for them,
Yeah.
So that's a driving force to be like that. There's fashion is involved here, and the fashion, that doesn't mean dressing up like a clown or anything. It means it's in here somehow as well as a clothing sense and a sartorial sense.
Well, I loved reading about Peter Green and how much he influenced you as a guitarist, because I could listen to Peter Green all day. I could put Albatross on repeat and listen to it all day. What a beautiful tone. Yeah. Tell us about when you first discovered him and how he influenced you as a guitarist.
That was a bit like before I went to Guernsey, before I left home there. But it was a similar period, 1968 and 69, with the blues, white blues bands were big, and I was hip to John Mayall early on because I had friends who were slightly older who had blues records. You know, they knew their stuff. They knew the folk musicians of Britain and the blues musicians of America. It all intertwined, that kind of thing. And Peter Green was someone, I think he went through the John Mayall stable because he had Eric Clapton. I think there was Mick Taylor, I think, Peter Green for a while. Peter Green was obviously a unique talent like those other guys. He just happened to hit me the hardest because what he played was soul music. What he sang was soul music. You know, the classic of that says it all in one song is Need Your Love So Bad, a song he didn't even write. The original version of it isn't very compelling, but Peter Green's version is ridiculous. And then they had this kid, Danny Kerwin, who joined. He was 17 at the time, and I went to see him, and he just joined. It was like after they had their hit Albatross, but they booked already in a small club in my area, and I'd already had tickets, and they had number one hit with Albatross, but they were still honoring this agreement to play in this tiny club called the Gin Mill Club in Godalming in Surrey, and so there was this kid Danny Kerwin, every bit as good as Peter Green, but unfortunately, I think he went the wrong way and got a bit probably addicted to something or other, and he hated the fame, hated it. And I don't think Peter Green did too much either, to be overwhelmed by suddenly they were having massive hits and they were worldwide. And Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, of course, the first album was a Fleetwood Mac album, and that was 68. And on a record label called Blue Horizon. Incidentally, a song of mine called Blue Horizon, this just sprung to mind, is on a record of mine called Struck by Lightning. And if you listen to that song, I'm playing lead guitar on it, as I did a lot of albums then. 1991 it came out. And I'm pulling from Peter Green all the way, man. I'm pulling all that stuff. I mean, I was never going to be a virtuoso. I was never going to be good enough to be that. I had to be a singer-songwriter, but when the red light comes on and I'm playing electric guitar, you know, some pretty good stuff comes out. And you might hear quite a bit of Peter Green's stuff in there mixed with a bit of Danny Kerwin in that very song, in the lead guitar playing.
Jay, I'll throw this to you. There are some great stories in the book of those early days. One, you mentioned Clapton, Graham, the story where you're playing foosball with Eric Clapton and Jack Bruce pre-Cream days at a club in Surrey.
Just before Cream, yeah.
Yeah. Any stories, any Graham stories that stand up for you, Jay? And Graham, you could, of course, add your thoughts as well, but any good stories from those days that you want to share?
Well, probably any good stories are in the book, you know, but it was just surprising as someone who's still, I think the funny thing with Eric Clapton is because Graham wasn't so much into him, he's playing foosball with Eric Clapton, and they were just guys down the block, and I thought that was a little surprising. But then the flip side, when he saw Peter Green, it was like, oh my God, I've just met God, So
yeah, that was more like it.
It's kind of just funny to hear how Graham viewed these different artists, some he was really into, some he's not, but all in this sort of classic rock realm. Well, one funny thing, I was looking for somebody to, and you think everybody knows everybody in the music industry, and I was looking for somebody to speak about Peter Green's prowess as a guitarist. I ended up with Snowy White, who was terrific, and I'm glad I spoke with him. But I said, I was throwing names off of Graham. I said, I'm going to try and reach Peter Frampton. And Graham said, never met him a day in my life, So I figured somewhere down the road he might have just crossed paths. So it's just funny how you think, as I said, everybody in the music industry, particularly I guess in Britain, knows everybody, but that ain't the case.
Song construction, Graham, when did that start for you? When did you start to realize, I can write a song? How do you develop that style? It takes a long time, right?
Well, it did for me. There are other people who are faster learners, but I was 24 when I got a record deal. That's kind of cutting it short. You got to be careful. And to me, it was like unknown whether I would ever. All I wanted to do was make one album. I thought if I could make that would be, amazing. At least I could go down the pub and people say, "Didn't you make an album once, Graham?" Yeah, I did actually. Yeah, that was it's pretty cool, man. That was it. The end. The end. It didn't really matter. But the song construction,
James Taylor was an influence, right?
yeah, well, they were all influences from the Beatles. Look at the song construction there, incredible, and all the stuff before it, that I heard pre that. But and the singer-songwriters came along at the same time as I was being influenced by psychedelic, more psychedelic kind of music. And there was James Taylor and people like that, and Joni Mitchell, and they could do it just on a guitar, if they wanted to. They made albums with musicians and all that, and that helps a lot. It all helped, every single bit of it. I mean, when the Beatles came along, I immediately wrote a song called "Won't You Come Back," complete with the ooh. But I was 13, It was obviously an innate ability. There's an innate ability there. It wasn't something I invented. It's not something you learn in college. I'm sure you can learn a lot of useful things, but they're just construction ideas, I suppose. But before my career fell into place and I found kind of myself, as it were, it would have been Back to School Days. It would have been Soul Shoes, songs that were on that album. That's when I realized there's no turning back. I have to complete this now. I have to keep, get writing in this kind of style, with this kind of intensity. Or there's something about it that was compelling enough to me to think I've got the tools here now. I didn't use that language, but that's what it felt like, really.
Right. Yeah, let's get into some of the songs. Let's get into the album. We have Graham Parker and Jay Nachman, the author of Graham Parker's Howlin Wind. The debut from 1976 features the musicians known as The Rumor, named after the song by the band. Thought that was interesting. I read that in the book. Jay, first, can you tell us about the history behind this lineup and how they teamed up with Graham? The accounts vary.
Yeah, well, that's a big story. I guess I'll try and be as brief as possible. Graham can certainly chime in, although he didn't actually meet them until he met them. But look, there was Brinsley Schwarz and Bob Andrews, who were members of the Brinsley Schwarz band. And another funny quote from Graham in the book where which I thought was unique and original. And then it was again one of those quotes where, oh man, I read it in Melody Maker or something from back in the day, where Graham says he thought Brinsley Schwarz was a heavy metal band from
I
Germany.
love that.
That's what it conjured up to him.
Yes.
Yeah, I really did.
And so Graham was not, I mean, that's another interesting thing too, is that Graham was just totally removed from that pub rock scene. Totally removed. It was just not on his radar at all. He thought Brinsley Schwarz was a heavy metal band, but they were sort of the kingpins, or one of the kingpins of the pub rock scene. And then you had Martin Belmont, who was in Ducks Deluxe, another leading pub rock band. And then you had the rhythm section of Andrew Bodner and Steve Goulding. But I guess really the key to all that is Dave Robinson. Dave Robinson sort of is the keystone who sort of knew all these people and then began working with Graham and eventually managing him. So he put them all together. I think that can really be laid at the feet of Dave Robinson. Yeah.
And then there were some gigs, a few gigs that were performed before you start recording the album, which, Graham, that was important. Tell us about those early gigs leading up to the recording, about a handful of gigs. One show somewhere in the sticks, you played in front of 3 people and a dog.
Yeah.
Other areas like London, people knew who Brinsley Schwarz was. It's a bigger crowd. But either way, that's where you guys gelled and became super tight.
Well, there's that recording that was on sale on grahamparker.net, the official website, live at Newlands Tavern, which is possibly the first gig that me and the Rumor ever did. Or it was the Nag's Head in High Wycombe. I've always got them confused, but let's call it the Newlands Tavern, where the owners allowed us to rehearse. They knew all the Brinsley people and all that stuff, and Dave Robinson. They allowed us to rehearse there for free. So that's where we got together. And as far as I know, that's when I met them all together. And it wasn't long before this tall fellow named Nick Lowe came down, because Dave Robinson thought he'd be good as a producer. And that show that we did there, somebody had some crude tape recording device at the bar. And it's astonishing to me how good I was. That was my first show in front of a real audience in a place where, some of the legends have played over the years, I suppose, and some artists who actually got paid to play. And we were good right then. So it didn't take long. It was instant almost.
Really?
And so probably when we played to Three Men and a Dog, we were really hot right then because that was after Newland's Tavern. And we would go up to a club in Birmingham that they used to play called Barbarella's. Another place, I think it might have been Newcastle, called the Outlook, which we called the Outlook Gloomy. That was somewhere up north. And people would come and sit on the floor cross-legged. That was it. That was some of the early gigs, and scratch their heads. Why is the guitar solo only 10 seconds long? That's a bit baffling. Guitar solos were supposed to be an hour long. Where's the drum solo? And here are we doing 3.5 minute songs with extreme aggression, and the audience was still like, this is a bit confusing. But a few people came out of that saying, that's what we've been waiting for. We like that, So those early gigs, you have to go through it to get to it. But we were pretty hot from the word go. We really were from that first gig.
So the confidence was there as you head into the studio to record this album.
Yeah, I mean, in reality, I was scared out of my mind. I was, very nervous. Get on stage, there's something called monitors, in fact, in front of me, these monitor wedges, and I'm supposed to know how to ask for things to go into the monitors. My vocal, you hear a bit of drums, I copied. I didn't know what I was doing. But on stage, it was like I just became sort of a hurricane force quickly. And once I'd learned I could put my acoustic guitar down, because no one could hear it anyway, and start strutting the stage around a bit and doing a bit of the Mick Jagger, I became very, very confident. It was like, I can own this thing. And so that started happening within about a year after Howlin Wind came out. In that year, it started happening that I could really start to think, yeah, because we went to America very quickly in 76, not long after the first album came out, and again for Heat Treatment, I think. Twice we went in the back of the station wagon. And I wasn't really, all I thought was, if they don't get it from hearing it, they're idiots. So why bother trying to make a show of it? And Dave criticized me a bit. He said, look at these American bands. I said, they're all fake. We were opening for all these American bands. We did a lot of American. And it was like, I said, yeah, I don't want to fake it. I just want to play. And then I think my guitar strap broke in one of those things that happen. Jay will know this from the story in the folk club. Guitar straps that are badly attached with bits of rubber, bits of leather bootlace. It snapped at one of the gigs me and the Rumor did. And so I just started poking at the air. Hey, Lord, don't ask me questions, instead of playing an acoustic guitar that nobody could hear. So that was, I thought, oh, here we go. Yeah, Dave's right. I need to make a show of this.
Yeah.
It's showbiz, man. It's not just singing, it's showbiz, And I cranked it up into overdrive from then on.
Jay, when did you first see Graham perform?
The first time I think I saw him was here in Philadelphia, where he opened up for Cheap Trick in a big arena, the Spectrum. And I was talking after the book with a friend of mine who was also at that show. And he said, I think the band Marillion was there as well, which I have no recollection of, none whatsoever. So that might have been in 78, 77. I can't remember exactly. But then I grew up I came to school here in Philadelphia where I live now, but I grew up in Virginia Beach. And that summer, I think it was 79, might have been 78. He played in a small club and they tore the roof off the place. I mean, everybody was standing up and screaming. And I still have the review from the show, which I've shared with Graham. And I've said this before as well. I mean, that summer, everybody was touring. In that same club, I saw Warren Zevon, I saw the Ramones. There were big arena shows, I think CSN, and Graham Park and the Rumor were as good as any of them, if not better. I mean, they were just at their peak. They were. Martin Belmont has said that as well. He said something like, in that period, there was no band better than us live, and I believe it because I saw it.
Was there concern, Graham, going into the studio then that you were able to translate that energy into the studio when you first went in to do Howlin Wind?
Yeah, by then I thought, wow, I got a record deal just like that. I've got this amazing crack band in behind me who know how to play my work. They've been around the block so much and played so many styles in their professions. They were professionals already. All these bands have broken up, like the Ducks Deluxe and Brinsley Schwartz and other bands that were called pub rock. They seem to have all kind of floundered a bit because they'd done enough of it, and it was like time for, see if something new came along. And it turned out for them that I dropped out of the sky from nowhere, from the suburbs, and so in the studio. I wasn't really intimidated. There was nerves. There's always nerves. I mean, you're always going to think, what if I screw up? What if I'm an idiot? But it didn't bother me. I just went in head first.
You defend Nick Lowe. Nick Lowe produced the album. He was criticized. Some would say he was just bashing out songs in the studio, but you say his contributions have at times been undervalued.
Well, yeah, I thought he was excellent at producing my work. Fantastic. And he went on to produce quite a whole bunch of other stuff. But and I didn't understand his songs then. I didn't think anything of them because I mean I'd never heard any of this stuff, and I had a record deal, so I get a free Brinsley Schwartz album so I hear these things, and I really didn't think, how does this relate to me? I don't know, but when these guys play, it relates to me somehow or another. They can transpose themselves into being backing musicians for me brilliantly. And so I think Nick, he's the man who gets the atmosphere. Like, this is fun, guys. Come on, and you can do, but come on, another take. Come on, that was almost there. But we didn't do many takes because that was the idea. Don't do too many takes. It always gets worse. With actual rock and roll, it always gets worse. If you can get the first take, you've got something. You've really got something. Otherwise, if it's the third or fourth, that's all right as well. That's pretty great. So, but I think he captured a sound. I think his ability along with the guy who came with the studio, the engineer, to get a sound that feels sometimes on a good stereo, it feels like you're a bit in the room with us.
Exactly.
And on a small speakers, it doesn't feel like that so much. But that was there, and I don't think I hardly ever reproduced that with any record.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of. Hitting play on that opening track, which is my favorite. I love White Honey, and you feel like you're in the room. You feel like you're in a club watching the band perform.
Yeah, he captured that really well. It was that a bit of spaciousness there, that you get now and again in some of those records, especially when they were on vinyl. As I think about digital now, all bands and acts and singers, we may all sound different, but digital makes it all feel the same. My specific word for that is it all feels the same now. It's not vinyl straight to a turntable. Having said that, I never listen to vinyl really, but I got vinyl records that I get all the time, but rarely listen because I don't have that set up really. So guilty as charged, but that's where we come to. That's okay. You got to progress. Everything goes forward. I'm not a Luddite really. I would prefer not to get Spotify fees, but that's the way that goes. But the actual idea of it being streamed, that's the way it was. I embraced cassettes when they came along because you could put them in your car. I had a little machine and I'd stick them on and have them on the seat next to me or on the back seat and playing stuff. So I embraced it all, but the feel of things was definitely different when it was made for vinyl and it was on vinyl and there was nothing else, So that Howlin Wind benefited from that.
Only thing is, I think it's important to add, we talk about the energy Graham and the Rumor brought to that first album, but let's not neglect the ballads. I mean, you're not going to get any finer singing than on Between You and Me or Gypsy Blood. So, there was that balance between the energetic, hardcore rocking stuff and then the really deeply emotional ballads.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into the tracks. The book gets into all of the tracks, and people should go out and buy the book for that. And of course, the story that leads up to the album, but just going to pick out two or three here. The track listing was put together by Graham and Nick, the 12 tracks are White Honey, Nothing's Gonna Pull Us Apart, Silly Thing, Gypsy Blood, Between You and Me, Back to School Days, Soul Shoes, Lady Doctor, You've Got to Be Kidding, Howlin Wind, title track, Not If It Pleases Me, and Don't Ask Me Questions. The album title you came up with, Graham, and I want to ask you about the title track, the opening lyrics, the waterfalls trinkling like bells to my ears, the earth rolls out before me through smiles and tears, a country lost, a soul discovered, the ruin that I once was will soon be covered. That song, you say, is about your reinvention. Tell us the story behind this one. The music just came to you in a moment of great inspiration.
Yeah, actually, hearing that sounds like I was tripping balls.
It's brilliant, by the way. I don't want to embarrass you, but
it's quite trippy. I was. Yeah, it's a reinvention. I think the constant reinvention of people when they're young and, maybe talented in some artistic respect or any respect, that it's different from accepting what your life was supposed to be. From me as, again, working class education, the class system education of Britain was where I come from. Howling Wind destroys that, in that song right there. It's reinvent yourself. If you've got what it takes to do that, it's there waiting for you until you find a sort of stronger version of you. And for me, it had to be music that did that. For other people, it will be totally different things. It doesn't matter. And that's, you can do that when you're very young. It's harder to do that when you're above 30, to reinvent yourself, let's be honest. And to write even songs that have the same synaptic kaboom to them. That's a young person's game for the most part. So I guess that's what it felt like I did. I was not going to buckle and be what I was supposed to be, according to my education, according to anybody around me. And I think it's not nothing original I'm stating here. It's youthful rebellion, almost against what you are. What have I been stuck with here? And I could end up like this for the rest of my life, man. So Howlin' Wind definitely illustrates that strongly to me, and it became the album title, perhaps as because of that, but also it sort of reminded me of Howling Wolf or something. I went back to the blues roots of it all. It sounded like that, I mean. There's talk about a character, a powerful presence. Howling Wolf, unbelievable. So, yeah, took a bit cheeky, I suppose, calling it Howling Wind, but there you go.
I love the swirling organ.
Yeah,
that's a wah-wah effect.
Yeah, he's got the Leslie thing going, the old spinning thing, and the Leslie, man, fantastic.
Yeah, Bob Andrews.
Yeah.
Well, I told you my favorite track is White Honey, and it's a tough call because, like Springsteen says, every cut is spectacular. Talk about this one, White Honey. There's some Van Morrison influence in there, but also the Tin Pan Alley songs like Shuffle Off to Buffalo.
Yeah, definitely. I had an album of all those Hollywood songs. I'd watch these films, black and white, Hooray for Hollywood and all this stuff, Busby Berkeley. And it coincided with some of the Van Morrison albums, post them, of course, Tupelo Honey and Hard Nose the Highway. It coincided with that. And it took me back to what I probably heard on radio. I probably heard some of those Busby Berkeley songs, Harry Warren and Al Rubin, those writers that Jay researched very well and found out, wow, the sheer body of work that those guys used to produce. And I was really into that as I was writing. And out comes White Honey. It's like, okay, there's the Van in there for sure, which everybody is going to shout, Van, rip off, they're going to do that, no question. But there's a lot more going on in that swing than that. There's also something that nobody has ever spotted, and I have said it a few times. I've actually illustrated it on stage, playing the song slow solo. That it's the one of the main influences the Young Rascals.
Oh, yeah.
You'd never hear that unless you know the melody, the Young Rascals, grooving on a Sunday afternoon. White honey, get it from your candy man.
Wow.
It's a real steal, but I didn't know it when I wrote it. I thought I was just doing Van, and then I realized, no, it's much more than that. And it's also, it's a bit, it's the Young Rascals. It's that melody.
But that's cool though. You take all those influences, but then it becomes your own.
Yeah, you repurpose it, and there's no doubting who it is. It's a bloke named Graham Parker, whoever he is. He's this new guy, but it's, yeah, okay, I get it. It sounds like him.
That's just, if I'm throwing a party, that's the song I'm starting with. That's going to get everybody up. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. All right, Jay, let's throw it to you, Jay. A favorite track for you, and then Graham can maybe you share a story behind that track. What's your favorite, Jay?
That's so tough. But it might be Between You and Me. Let me add, some people may be able to relate to this if my memory's right. There's certain artists you chase because you want to hear them do certain songs live. And I think I finally got to hear Between You and Me live, Graham, at the Tin Angel. I know you played a lot here in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
But I think you might have done a reggae version. I'm not quite
Yeah.
sure. Did you ever? So it's like, no, give me the original. But that said, I just think the vocals on that are so evocative, and it's kind of a unrequited love kind of story that I could relate to at that time. So that, ask me another day, it might be, Howlin Wind or Don't Ask Me Questions. But right now, it's Between You and Me.
Graham's story behind that song?
Yeah, not based on anything specific, but based on experience of being dissed and this kind of thing, the male-female thing of. But I didn't put any nastiness into it, strangely. It was pretty sweet, the whole thing. And I said to Jay, I think that all I knew were the lights in the harbor. It reminded me of Otis singing at the dock of the bay. I make this dock, something about that atmosphere of him sitting by the dock of the bay. And, whatever, maybe something romantic in there, something romantic about sitting at the dock of the bay. In fact, I was working on the docks in Gibraltar many years before. Maybe a bit of that atmosphere came through to me, or any dock sitting there and the waves and the quiet of the boats or something. I think that's as important as anything that might be real or might not be real about the lyrics. It's being evocative with lyrics, and I thought that was immediately evocative as soon as I started writing that. I do remember that much, and it's very singer-songwriter. The song is totally, it's not any of these pub rock, punk rock, new wave. It's a singer-songwriter song. The reason I've been doing it reggae for quite some years, Jay, is because it just feels good to me. I sort of prefer it. And now, because of a few hand problems of being, ancient, these things happen. And from playing guitar with terrible technique for most of my life, it's easier to play reggae on electric guitar. So that's, maybe you won't hear it again the way it should be. I understand. Sorry.
Graham, is there a song you're most proud of? Would it be the title track from this album?
I think Between You and Me, I'll be as proud of that as anything, but I'm proud of the entire album in a way. I mean, I can't help but be, because it's my first album, and I'd never. A lot of artists would be just disregard it, but no, I was good enough right then. I'm not going to disregard it. It was a fantastic first record.
Really, I mean, to be that good right out of the gate.
That's why. Yeah, there it was. I thought it was always a good thing to not go off sort of half with the gun half loaded. I started to gather that feeling and thought, no, keep writing. They're not good enough, even though I could have missed the train by being a bit old. By the time I got the deal.
But how old were you at that time?
I was 24, I think, when I got the deal.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like 1975, and I was not 25 until November. And we were already a band then. I had a record deal and all that stuff. As far as my timeline goes, I think Jay will agree with that timeline, because we all had to put our heads together and think hard, and no one was taking notes back then. But so that's all. George Harrison, what was he, 17? Their talent came a lot stronger than mine did at a very young age, but mine just had to go through a lot of stuff.
That's always an interesting story, though, that when an artist hits, some of them are later. I think Sting was maybe in his late 20s, and when the Police took off. I mean, that's always interesting. But Graham, you mentioned Peter Green and having trouble with fame. How did you feel about the praise that the album received from the fans, from the critics like Real Marcus? Was that all good, or was it a little bit like, whoa, this is putting a lot of pressure on me here?
I thought it was. I expected it. I expected people like Real Marcus, who I didn't really know much about, if anything. But I realized, oh, this is one of the top guys. He's actually on tour with us. He thinks that much of it. I thought they would get it. I actually thought that the critics would get it. The public probably won't. And as far as the American public were concerned, it wasn't going to get played on radio to any extent. There wasn't, thousands of tiny stations that people had in their own house then. There was the college radio, and I'd find myself at some of those places late at night talking to the DJs and drinking and stuff, and they were playing what they wanted. But most of America was pretty buttoned up with the what became known as corporate rock. So I didn't think it was going to be an easy sell at all, but didn't worry me one bit, man. There I was out on the road. I did become overwhelmed with my modest amount of fame, and I thought it would be pretty awful to be really famous. I just thought that would be awful. Not that I didn't try to write hit songs or anything. I always thought they were catchy. I was just writing songs, and I always thought they had a lot going for them in that respect. But it was, I just wanted to duck out of all the attention a lot of the times. I'd do a gig in London, like 2,000 people, and just sneak out the back door with my girlfriend at the time, or drive back to my parents in the night and crash there, because it was overwhelming, all this flood of information, all these people who want to know you and stuff. And I had very modest fame, but it's much more than you kind of think it is when you're at a low level like we were, that kind of mid-level, playing the 2,000, 3,000 theaters and doing 3 nights. It's a certain amount of, Graham, we want you, come here, Graham, go, I love you, Graham. It's like, God damn it, I didn't really ask for that. But
when did you become comfortable with that, or when did you realize, okay, I can handle this? It is what it is. It's not going to change. I gotta deal with it.
Stopped. I think when it slowed down, and I got to the point in my career where I was a figure. I wasn't going to suddenly become a superstar. They weren't, but still, there was too much. It was still too much. It's better now. It was better when I was, in the 90s and 2000s, just playing small gigs around the USA and to some extent Britain, and going to Sweden and Europe doing solo gigs or with a backing band out in the middle of nowhere. Wherever I was, it seems it's much more enjoyable and down to earth.
Hey guys, we'll get back to the show, but first I want to tell you about an exclusive deal for Booked on Rock listeners. Get 15% off any purchase at oldglory.com. Over 300,000 officially licensed items covering music, sports, entertainment, and pop culture. Merchandise featuring legendary music artists like Bob Marley, The Beatles, Grateful Dead, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, and many, many more. Go to oldglory.com. Make sure to use the promo code BookedOnRock. Also find a link in this episode's show notes, or just go to bookedonrock.com and click on My Deals. I was telling my friend I was going to be interviewing you, and she goes, "Oh my God, this is 40." That was the first thing she said. So what did that do what was that experience? How did that all come about, by the way? But then also, that got you some notice. People recognize you, right?
Well, yeah, it was a really good career bump, or life bump, really. It was like having my first album.
Right.
Deal. It was a bit like that. This was like, wow, this excitement is amazing, man. Great.
The Paul Rudd movie, by the way, for those who may not know, Graham is in that.
Judd Apatow and Paul Rudd, yes, oh man, it was unbelievable. I just reformed the rumor by accident, and they were going to. Okay, they all agreed they were going to come to the USA. I wanted to do it there in a studio I'd worked at, Struck by Lightning being one of the records, and quite a few others. I wanted to do the first reunion album there. And within a week or two of doing that, Judd Apatow got hold of my new publishing company and they said he wants to talk to you. I said, well, come on, give me email. And I said, I'll meet you anywhere, Judd. And because he used Love Gets You Twisted in one of his shows. It's called Undeclared. fantastic show, actually, along with Freaks and Geeks, TV shows that never made it big because they were too good and TV networks didn't
It's a
really
great
get them.
show. Yeah.
Yeah, they were great shows. And I missed them entirely until my
Yeah.
song had been used. And then I discovered Freaks and Geeks. I think it came before Undeclared. And so Judd is a big fan of lots of artists. I mean, I'm just one of the many. But he saw the potential of me acting this guy who destroys the record company by dint of his spectacular unpopularity. And he's like, wait a minute, yeah, I'm in my 60s. It was the record company in Unfiltered Record, Paul Rudd's record label, has also signed Haircut 100, apparently. And, Frank Black without the main focus of his music, which was the Pixies, and he signed all these losers, and potentially and really. And I thought, oh, I can kill this role. This is me. Yeah, I can destroy a record company just like that, man. No problem. And so it was a great bump.
That's cool.
It was a wonderful thing. And I was turning up at all these things at some big hall in New York with most of the cast of the actors being flown first class. This is years after to Hollywood, to be at the Billboard building with artists and talking about music and film like I know anything, bluffing my way. So, oh, great, I get a lot of free food, a first-class hotel and a first-class flight. Yeah, bring it, And whenever I'd be out in England anywhere, and a few people would say, he's Graham Parker, and they'd look me up. Oh, yeah, I saw the movie. Young people like 20-year-olds. Oh, yeah, you're the guy who ruined that agency. The record company. My neighbours here in London, their kids were watching the TV. They were watching they didn't know much about me. They knew it was something to do with music. They were watching the TV one night, and This Is 40 came on, and they were like, it's Graham, it's next door. And the kids were really little.
That's awesome.
From then on, those kids were like hiding from me. So, oh God, he's a movie star. Now they're great big tall men, and they're like, he's just that stupid geezer, that old guy. Just bumbles around,
Well, I'll tell you, and Jay, you could attest to this, I'm sure. There was one time I was at my brother was throwing a party. We're all listening to some music, and there's always that section of the group of friends that my brother has. We just love music. And, you start talking about popular bands, popular artists, start talking about the really cool musicians, the ones you really need to know. And I'm telling you, I'm not making this up. So many times, Graham Parker. You ever listen to Graham Parker? I said, yeah, I know who Graham Parker is. Like, you're that cool. Like, there are a lot of people that know who you are, but there are people that may not, and they should. And I don't know, Jay, if you know what I'm talking about. You have those conversations with music friends. It's like,
right. Well, it's hard because most of my music friends, we share similar tastes, But even now, some, they might like this group a little more than me. I might like a little group more than them. But in the main, we like the kind of, I don't want to mention any names, but we're not as interested in what Graham referred to as corporate rock.
Right.
We like the real thing. And so, most of my friends are pretty aware of Graham Parker. My sisters-in-laws, that's a different story, so he's not like the mainstream, they're not going to know Graham. And if you can expose his music to some of them, either through the music or the book, hey, all the better. Can I say one more thing that we touched on that I want to expand, which is one of the things that, I don't know if surprise is the right word, but Graham's self-awareness that his songs have to be top notch. I mean, I have this mental image of him scribbling on a notepad, crumpling it up and throwing it away. It may not have happened like that, but over and over in the book, he says I knew the songs just weren't good enough. And I think that's the mark of a real artist who's saying, I'm not going to just put it out there just to have something out there. The songs have to be good. And I think that's been a hallmark throughout his career. But it was interesting to me that he just knew himself. He was self-aware enough to know that it begins with the songs. All right, Graham, I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but
yeah, I did make a few attempts, premature attempts. I soon realized after, when I started writing the songs that became Howlin Wind. One was John Peel, the British DJ, started a label with a kind of slightly post-psychedelic name of Dandelion Records. And I did send him some kind of tape of my songs at the time, which I knew were good in their own way. And it didn't, I think I got a postcard from him actually back, which was not quite what we're looking for now, which kind of ruined about, the next hour of my life. The idea of that, I was pretty young. I was pretty young then and not ready. So there were a few premature attempts, and one was getting a publishing deal before my career began with a company called Tower Bridge Records. And because I thought, well, maybe my songs, maybe they can get them to people who are established and they might find something in them. But they weren't quite there. And it was very good that I understood that as I was growing in my 20s, from age 22, 23 onwards. I sort of had this understanding that, man, you got to keep working. You've got to be more than just, good. You've got to be better than good. And kept working, kept writing. And it just became a sort of mindset of mine, and it's almost a sense of morality about it. Don't waste anyone's time, including your own.
Jay, yeah, what does this album mean to you all these years later?
I play Howlin Wind periodically, a few times a year, but obviously I listened to it a lot closer while doing the book. And I was reminded once again just how good the album is. All three elements. You've got the band playing they're playing with such sensitivity behind Graham. Just every note's in the right place. Every instrument is right there. You've got these wonderful, wonderful lyrics, and then, as I think I say in the book, the vocals just tie together. His singing is just so passionate, and so he's invested in every lyric, every line. And so you've got, the playing, the singing, and the lyrics, the songs themselves, and it's just, spectacular. Like Bruce Springsteen said, every song is spectacular.
Find the Booked on Rock website at bookedonrock.com. There you can find all the back episodes of the show, the latest episode in video and audio, links to all of the platforms where you can listen to the podcast, plus all the social media platforms. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. Also, check out the Booked on Rock blog, find your local independent bookstore, find out all the latest hot rock book releases, and before you go, check out the Booked on Rock online store. Pick up some Booked on Rock merch. It's all at bookedonrock.com. Graham Parker's Howlin Wind is out now. You can find it through Amazon, correct?
Correct. Graham Parker's Howlin Wind on Amazon, and you'll see plenty of 5-star reviews. Absolutely well worth the read. And I really, congratulations, Jay, on this project, and Graham, congrats on an amazing career. And we're looking forward to, I was talking to you before we started recording, maybe you can come back around here to the East Coast here in the US. I'd love to see you perform.
Yeah, well, you have to keep an eye on grahamparker.net, I suppose, and on the tour page. Some people follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky. So I usually, and there's a official Facebook page, Graham Parker. So, that's how we find things out these days, I guess, online. But I'll be there, hopefully second, third week of April. By the end of doing some shows, solo shows, April, May. Connecticut may well get on the list. It depends on all the vagaries of booking. Everyone and his brother is out touring and playing everywhere. It's competitive, and getting things in line with a touring schedule is always difficult for the agents, the booking agents, my agent. But keep an eye out. That's the way to do it.
And Jay, where can we find you if we want to find you online, website, social media? Yeah, so there's a website called, what is it? I think it's called grahamparkershowlinwind.net. And that has my email address on it and a link to purchase the book. And otherwise, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Facebook. I love to hear from people about what they think about the book, and if
their thoughts are good, I usually send them on the gram. I don't, but
Yeah.
there hasn't been anything too negative. Yeah, I'm happy to hear from people. Sure.
Great. Graham Parker, Jay Nachman, thank you so much, guys.
Well, thank you, Jay, for a great book. You did a really amazing job, very well researched. And thanks, Eric, for your time, man. It was nice talking to you.
That's it. It's in the books.